All right, well, we might get started as people are coming back into the room. Look, we want to say first and foremost, thank you very, very much for sticking around and being here at the end of the conference. The 2 days have flown by, as you would have known, and through your conversations. Some of you will say some things haven't progressed much in 20 years, and I get that. And we're going to have a conversation about what we can get out of this more than a talk fest in a minute when I hand you over to Leanne. But I just wanted to touch base by talking through some of the things that you would have seen and heard today, very quickly as a bit of a recap. We started off with John Lawrence, and he had a very passionate and a very strongly opinionated speech about a whole range of things, which was great. He started off by talking about the stolen land. We're not in a housing crisis, we're in a catastrophe. He wanted to put that right there. He spoke really importantly and eloquently about human rights have evaporated within the Northern Territory in particular, but that could be argued across the nation. And he said it's a disgrace when we look at some of the things that we've got going on around the education system, incarceration, people living the way that they're living, and we've seen no real progress in a period of time. And he believes that people are worse off, and that's probably something that's shared by a lot of people within the room. We then moved over to Leanne, who gave us a bit of a history about AHANT and how it came about, and certainly the earlier work that was done pre-ATSEC, and then later on when the establishment of AHANT was formally incorporated and came together, and shared the story about what they do, how it was conceived, how it was important in playing a critical role in strengthening the sector and working with members. And there was a really important piece around a thank you to the staff and board, and there's a lot of work that they're doing on the smell of an oily rag, and they were fortunate to get a little bit of top-up money for wages, but all in all their work is really important as a peak body. We heard a keynote from a guest who was online, Yingira, Mark? Yingira, yeah. And we had a few technical problems, but he did talk about a lot of stuff that you've heard over the last couple of days, and that was about the need for better outcomes. He started off by talking about just his family and giving you a cultural context of where he came from and how he moved around as a young person and as a young man, with the seasons, with family, before moving into, there's been no new housing for 25 years in his community, and the work that they've done with government, trying to engage the United Nations and getting other people involved, and that there's more work to be done, and he continues to be an advocate. And he just wanted people to know that, you know, he's tired of people putting the blame on Aboriginal people for the circumstances that we're in, and there's a lot more work to be done in there. I did like the fact that he did raise the issue that sometimes there's no respect for culture, and it's having an impact on what we're building and what we're seeing in the Northern Territory. And we know the importance of culture, so he wasn't far off the mark. And he spoke about the issue of oppression, and it's still happening, and that we hope to move past that. We then moved to our colleagues from New Zealand who shared a presentation with us with Roo, Jenny and Nahoya, and they gave an example of some of the things that they were doing in their country, and certainly some of the research that they were doing. But they spoke about a lot of things that were really critical, the same sort of things that we talk about here around sovereignty, self-determination, growth and protection, creating lives that had meaning, and utilising people with lived life experience to help guide some of their stuff. They spoke about the decline in funding that they saw in New Zealand with the successive government, or the government that's in at the moment, and they're looking for some change. And they spoke about some of the things that were really important, and young people having a bit of a say in the type of dwellings that they want and so forth. But importantly, they spoke about what they were doing from a research point of view and some of the stuff that we can learn from them. And in particular, just some of the exciting stuff that they're doing around housing patterns and other things that they're doing around revitalisation of land that they've got back, and community driving what needs to happen. And importantly, they did say something, don't wait for government. Get out, if you need something to get done, go ahead and do it. So I really like that. We then broke into two rooms, Litchfield and here, and in the boardroom we spoke about stock transition and the importance of stock transition and how it could be done, and there was an example that was done and shared with us at that time. and through Yili Housing and what they're proposing and how they're looking at stock transfer. And in the other room we had the mob from Perth talking about their Housing First principle and how that works. And it's a really important piece because it's sort of looking at a number of things that we take for granted around housing principles and just putting a cultural lens on it. So between those two presentations, they were excellent and informative. We then moved into talking about some of the things around reframing the work in terms of homelands and talking about health, housing and the economy, and that was a bit of a panel session. And while in here we spoke about local government, but each of those had a different flavour to them, and they were driven by different conversations by the people who were involved and talking about those. So we're very grateful for those two presenters sharing that. After lunch, we continued with our concurrent sessions, and we continue to see panel sessions run in different rooms. In one room, we were talking about new housing design and climate change, and it was presented by a number of people, but they went through everything from thermal layer and thermal protection through to climate challenges and what they're needing to do, the issues of housing and making housing suitable for different times of the year, and certainly warming a house in the winter and cooling it in a summer. So that was a pretty interesting conversation. And then here we spoke about people and country and community approaches. And Kieran Wong from WA from Fulcrum and Ron were up on stage, and they gave an exciting presentation about a master plan that a lot of people don't see, but they spoke more about sharing concepts, talking about being ready for opportunities, and they just spoke about what they would do and how they did it. So they had a plan in their head, and we're hoping that the work that they do, certainly in the homelands, is repeated and taken on board by people who sat in that session. After that, we spoke about the health impacts of thermal comfort and housing, and Ray, Vanessa and Michael spoke about that in a panel room in the light cart room. And that was interesting, just talking about everything from smart meters right through to the impacts, the weather and the climate. And there's some good questions that came from the floor about, you know, the cost of electricity and other stuff, and is there a way to reduce some of those? And is there any costings around it? But they shared what they saw, what their research is telling them, and we're looking forward to seeing more research done on that. In this room, we had Liam from Menzies talking about talking about housing policy in the Northern Territory, and it was one of the most detailed pieces that I've seen, and I work in housing policy. To see it broken down in 6 points and to put artefacts up there to show you this is what was agreed at a point in time and the words that were used, just shows you the stuff that we have to deal with in a policy landscape where we have to navigate what one level of government has set against another level of government and who's got responsibility. And some of that has a direct impact on us. And he closed off his session by really talking about, while he talked about the reports, he spoke about the policy vacancy or the vacuum and some of the things that need to be done, and he offered some solutions around that. Then we moved to our close, where in one room we spoke about working together for healthy homes in remote communities, and then I was growled by Leslie, Michelle and Emma for not getting their names right in the right order. Got it sorted in the end, but they're very capable women and shared some very good stories about what they'd seen, what they'd worked on, some of their examples, and that was the only room that I saw with giveaways, so it was very good. And then in this room, we certainly had Serena, Norman, Jimmy and Simon Quilty up on stage, and they were talking about a particular housing design that they'd seen, that they were involved in building, funding, involved with the design of for Norman and Serena, and they showed floor plans and examples of how it compares to some government type funding houses, and they shared with us a whole lot of things around their work that they were doing around putting the house and everything else together, how it got designed, and they're willing to share their designs and concepts. And if I remember correctly, there was a big party planned for 1st of June or somewhere in June in Tennant Creek. 9th of July. So it's very exciting, but what we got out of that, as well as the other presenters this afternoon, was the willingness to share information. For many of you who are wondering, will you be able to get the slide decks and all that, there's a commitment from the organisers that that information will go out for people who are at the conference, so you will get a copy of that when it's available, and I'm sure the team will pull that together. That's enough from me. I'd just like to thank you for supporting me and helping me get through the last couple of days. It does make a big difference when you've got a crowd who are very engaging and easy to work with. It's wonderful to be part of the family for the last couple of days and to work with them. And I'd just like to acknowledge the team, the board, and certainly your contractors and other people that you've had work, whether it was from sound, audio, and what else. And finally, I'll go back and reiterate to everyone here, thank you, and you wonderful VIPs. Have a good evening.